Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video in the introduction to the finite element method. And in today's video we are going to continue developing our plane stress and strain elements with a special emphasis on the CST or constant strain triangle element. So let me remind you what we have reached last time. Last time we established our displacement function, which was a1 plus a2x plus a3y and so on. And we have tried to find the different a's as a function of the nodal displacements. And we got those little things, alpha and beta and gamma. Those are usually the delta x, delta y, and delta whatever of the two other nodes. So I have talked about this last time. And now we have the shape functions. Those shape functions are used both for the u displacement field and the v displacement field. But this is where we stopped. Now, before I continue, I want to give you a quick rundown as to why we're doing this. It seems we are following certain steps, but you might forget as to why we are following those steps. Well, let me remind you of something you know from mechanics of materials back when you were at the university. So in the mechanics of material course, you learned that for an axially loaded element, so fixed from one side, loaded from the other, your delta was PL over AE. If you have a bar that is being pulled down by a force P, you will get a delta that goes down, and the calculation of the delta is PL over AE. Now this means that P equals L over AE multiplied by delta. This will give you a parallel to F equals Kx. There is an analogy between those two things. So from that analogy, you can understand that K is basically L over AE. Now, how do you do this in mechanics of materials? If you remember that, in mechanics of materials, we started by understanding the displacement and finding the epsilon from it. Assuming constant strain, we got delta over L as our epsilon, and this was called the engineering strain, and this was the deflection. We tried to find the displacement and the strain-displacement relationship, and then we had to find the stress-strain relationship via Hooke's law, and replace the stress with the force, which is basically P over A. My teaching assistant seems to have messed up the equation here. So we needed a stress-force equation, P over A. We need the stress-strain relationship, sigma E epsilon, and we need the strain-displacement relationship. So you see, we need those things as a penultimate step to find our stiffness matrix. And of course, I cannot find this without having an assumption of the displacement shape itself, or the displacement field itself, and the strain field itself. Now, this was based on a constant strain for a bar, and we are following similar reasoning for a plate. Okay, so let's get back on track. Our point here, once again, reminding you of this, is to find your epsilon, because this is one of the key components. Multiplying epsilon by some material matrix will give you stresses and forces. Epsilon in a two-dimensional shape is not only epsilon in one direction x, it's epsilon in one direction x, it's epsilon in one direction y, and there is an epsilon in the xy direction, or as we like to call it, the gamma. Now those are well known. Epsilon x is the partial u over partial x, epsilon y is partial v over partial y, and gamma is u to y and v to x. So knowing that u of xy is this function, and v of xy is that function, one could say, well, that's easy. All I have to do is to partialize each one of those equations, which I've done here. Partial u over partial x is a2. It's a2 because when you partialize the function, then the other elements become constants. Like a1 is a constant when you partial to x, and even y is a constant because you are partialing towards x. So you only see a2 for this. Also, partial u to partial y is a3. Similarly, you have a6 and a5. Now, you would think, well, that's easy. This means that those epsilons are actually the following. You would think that those epsilons are basically A2 here, and I think this is A5 or something, A3, I think, I don't know, I forgot the number. So you think those are simple numbers here. No, those are not your A2 and A3 and A5. Now you would think, wait a minute, I mean, this is obviously A2. Why not take A2 and put it here? We are not taking A2 and putting it here because we don't know A2. We basically invested our entire last lecture just replacing A2 with a representation of the node displacements. So A2 is not used. What is used instead are the shape functions. So yes, those A2, A6, A3, and A5 are yes, okay, but those are not representations of the nodal displacements. We have done that via shape functions. So this approach, although it seems to make sense, is actually not, as the Germans say, nicht zielführend, not achieving anything. So this approach kind of is not really the correct one. The correct one is to use those shape functions to find partial u over partial x. Now, why am I going to use those shape functions? I'm going to use them because those shape functions actually have x and y. I can partialize those. I mean, think about it. I even have a slide for this. Take a look at this. Now, those are okay, but are not helping. So if you want partial u over partial x, the only element that will survive in an I is beta, beta, beta. And if you want partial to partial y, the only things that will survive are gamma, gamma, gamma. Alpha is invisible in all of them because alpha is a constant not relying on x, not relying on y, so it always gets eliminated when you partialize your equation. So with that being said, you will see this strange thing. What is this? This is an I partialized to x. And you know that if you take an I and partialize it to x, you get beta 1. This is, remember, this partial u, partial x is basically this entire row multiplied by this entire column. It's basically the derivative of the shape function multiplied by the nodal displacements. You see, I can state a statement here. I can say that this partial u or partial x equals A2. Yes, we know, but it's not helpful. However, I can use the shape function to find u, and I can partial derive the shape function to find partial u, partial x. So when you partially derive an I to x, you get beta, beta, beta. That's why I see beta I multiplied by u and beta j multiplied by u and beta m multiplied by u. Similarly, you get gamma, gamma, gamma for partial v over y because gamma is the derivative of the shape function in respect to y. Of course, here you see gamma and beta because once you are partial deriving to y, and once you are partial deriving to x, and that's why you see gamma, beta, gamma, beta, gamma, beta. The book starts doing some mathematical shenanigans, but if you got this, then you are golden. You don't need to have this beta representation and beta j representation and beta m representation. In the next video, I will basically show you how I would approach an example, because I do not want you to approach an example as if it is a bunch of steps that you need to memorize. No, I want you to approach the example as an understanding, as something that makes sense. And we will see this in the next example, not today. So we have our epsilon, and to find sigmas, the only thing we need to do is to multiply epsilon by the material matrix. Remember, you cannot simply say epsilon multiplied by E. This works for a one-dimensional element, but it doesn't work for a three-dimensional element because there are Poisson's ratio and whatnot involved. So since we have epsilon, we can now use our epsilons and multiply by d to find our sigmas. Of course, d has two versions. It could be a plane strain material matrix. It could be a plane stress material matrix, but it's a matrix nonetheless. So this is sigma equals E multiplied by epsilon, which is b multiplied by d. Like b multiplied by d is your epsilon, and d is your E, but of course in matrix form and more complicated form. So now I just want to remind you that in energy methods, I told you before, and I don't know when, I think in one of my previous videos, I told you before that the stiffness matrix is always going to be BDB. I think it was called BEB or something in the beam or in the truss element, but it's always going to be in all the finite elements, stiffness matrices. Your local stiffness matrix is always going to be a triple integration of BDB for reasons that I've explained before about minimum potential energy. So we need to find the triple integration of those three matrices. Now wait, what are those matrices? Well, a D is a constant matrix. Why is it a constant matrix? Because D doesn't rely on the volume. I mean, look at this. This is a triple integration, right? A triple integration is done because we're integrating the energy state of the volumetric element. So in a volumetric element, you have a dx, which is the distance of the volumetric element in x. You have dy, which is the distance of the volumetric element in y. And you have dz, which is the distance of the volumetric element in z. Now here's the thing. Which ones rely on x and y and z? The answer is nothing. Why nothing? Well, the D matrix is the material matrix. The only thing you see in the material matrix are the elastic modulus and the Poisson's ratio. There is no mentioning of x and there is no mentioning of y, so I can basically take out the D outside of the integration. Of course, I cannot simply take it out due to matrix multiplication issues, but I mean, you get the idea. This D is not going to be affected by the integration. But that's not all. You know what else is not affected by the integrations? Betas. You would think, wait a minute, I thought B was a strain matrix. Yes, but B doesn't have any X inside it and doesn't have any Y inside it. And this has an obvious reason. If you go back to our assumption, it is a constant strain triangle. So the strain inside the triangle doesn't depend on the location X, doesn't depend on the location Y. As a matter of fact, it's just A2 or A6 or beta. Now beta and gamma and so on are not depending on the X variable. Don't mix up. I know in beta there is the X and Y locations, but those are constant locations, part of the triangle. Those are not variables. The variable is a position inside the triangle, and no matter where you go inside the triangle, the strain is always going to be constant, so B was always constant. Those betas are actually constant values, numbers, not functions. If they were functions in X, for example, if this beta was a function in X, then it would be integrated and would be affected by the integration. But because B and beta and gamma and so on is not a function in X, you can easily take it out. So your K-stiffness matrix actually equals like B dB multiplied by a triple integration. Now, of course, the triple integration can be translated into the volume of the shape, or in other words, the first integration and the second integration in X and Y can be translated into the area, and the third integration in the Z can be translated into the thickness. That's basically how the local stiffness matrix is calculated. Now, of course, we need a final point here to address, which is basically the transformation matrix. This here on the left side is a cool way of writing the stiffness matrix. Well, I will show you how I will approach the examples when I reach that next video. But before that, you need the transformation matrix to transform the local stiffness matrix into the global stiffness matrix. And in that case, you have seen this before. This was your truss element transformation. And we are using 3 patches of this truss element transformation because in a previous truss element, you only had a 4x4 matrix and there was a larger matrix in expanded form, but the simplistic matrix was a 4x4 matrix because in the truss element you only had to transform 2 nodes. In a triangle element, you have a 6x6 matrix because suddenly you have 3 nodes that you need to transform, and this is the transformation matrix of the CST. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to talk about, and by today's lecture, you should have the ability to calculate the local stiffness matrix and even try out solving some questions in the book. If you want, you can go ahead and solve yourself a question there or an example, and I will be doing this in the next video so that you can compare your calculation with mine. Because I might have a different style of approaching or calculating the local stiffness matrix in that example. With that being said, I want to thank you very much for watching and want to apologize for this video being a little bit late, but you might hear that there's different sound quality this time. I invested in a new mic. After the old mic was not really good. Before I finish, I want to give a transformation matrix sized shout out to our dear channel members in the contributor level and the helper level, whose names are going to be shown on the screen. I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart, as the support of the channel is priceless to me and enables me to provide you with the videos with a certain level that I want to achieve. With that being said, I hope that you enjoyed the video and that it was beneficial for you. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, then please consider providing a sacrifice to the YouTube algorithm by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing, especially subscribing because it helps increase the reach of my channel. As per usual, this is the Civil Engineering Essentials channel, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.